Thank you, Carla, Patagonia Books, and the publishers and writers of San Diego for inviting me here to speak. So there I was, about 3 years ago, just sitting at a stoplight in my car, minding my own business, picking my nose. And I started to get that feeling you could tell when somebody's looking at you. So I turned my head to my left, and I still have my finger on my nostril, and I see this woman in this car next to me, just giving me that look, that combination of sort of disgust and amazement. And she says to me with her universal look of shaking her head, "You should be ashamed of yourself." Now, I fashion myself a bit of a gentleman, Renaissance man on occasion, but I do still pick my nose now and then. But this time, in this specific instance, there was actually circumstances that made it okay in my mind. I had just had surgery the week earlier to repair a deviated septum. I don't know if anybody's had that surgery, but after that, for a good week or two, you're pretty sore and your nose is pretty much running the entire time. So this woman looked at me, and in her universe, she saw a man picking his nose. Now, in my universe, I was just a person trying to hold myself together until I got home. And I realized that she was judging me solely on what she had in her universe, not was in the universe. And it was at that moment that the philosophy of ubiquitous relativity and the book by the same name began. I hope today to talk about why I wrote this book, why I felt compelled to write this book. I want to talk a little bit about the philosophy itself. I want to talk about how my life while writing this book went from looking at my days as a means to an end, and became looking at my day as an end in and of itself. My definition of success and what that means as a person, and for my book as a success, how will I measure that? And so when I think about that, it changes the way that I market the book. And I'll talk about sort of marketing the book in today's world for me, the messaging, and how the messaging and marketing of the book has converged with the messaging and the marketing of me as a person. And then I'll touch on sort of finally my expectations or my hope for what this book will become. So my whole life I wanted to write, and I really thought like I had something, I could do this. And I tried to come up with all these great ideas. I thought, you know what? First, I was going to capture my generation, the lost generation, like Fitzgerald did. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll write a dystopia, because, you know, who doesn't like a good story about the machines taking over and Big Brother, et cetera? And I was going to come up with, you know, something creative like 2084 or Braver New World. And then I thought maybe I'd even write a revenge novel, you know, with all the 7 sins and all that stuff. But they all turned out to be false starts. I mean, the reality is I'm a Gen X. Like, we dressed badly in the 80s. We listened to too much grunge in the 90s, but we're not a lost generation. As far as dystopias, I mean, I like, you know, the whole Big Brother kind of machines take over as much as the next person, but at the end of the day, I'm just not that negative about the future. And as far as revenge novels, I just could never get to that point where I felt like I've got something to write here. So I would try to write a couple of chapters, and I'd go to Starbucks or Barnes and Noble and just kind of hang out, try my thing. Never really happened. But then that moment happened at the stoplight with the lady. Suddenly my mind started to think, like, what's going on here? Like I feel this, like I'm compelled to write this. Like I feel like this real passion, like somebody telling me, get this down, write it. Because there's something here. There's something that you've actually finally found that you care enough about to write. And I wondered, why is this happening? Why now? And then I realized I started writing this book around the election. And I started hearing people say things like, we've never been more polarized. This is the most polarized this country's ever been. And I, study a little history, and I thought about that. I said, well, because we did have a civil war. Where brothers fought brothers, and we had 1 million casualties over the course of 4 years. And even if you look back at the 1960s, certainly there was a lot more turmoil and violence in the streets than what we have now. So I didn't agree with that. But what I did agree with was that it feels that way. It feels terrible right now. And I started to think about why that is, and certainly technology is playing a large part. When I go into Starbucks and I look around and every person's on a laptop with headphones in, and there's couples sitting at a table each on their phones, and there's people in line, instead of talking to each other, they're going through email and social media. And then I started to hear people say things like, I just had to unfriend all these people because their views are just it's crazy. And I realized that the philosophy of ubiquitous relativity is all about connecting to each other. It's about pausing on judgment. And so what's going on in the world right now, from my perception, was sort of a catalyst for why I felt like I've got to write this down. And ubiquitous relativity itself, the philosophy, is essentially that it's the notion that each individual uniquely senses the universe physiologically. And that each individual has a unique set of emotions triggered by those senses, unique to them in the whole universe. And as a result, each of us, each of the 7.5 billion people on the planet, all live in our own universe. And no two universes are the same. And when you get right down to it, we know virtually nothing about any other universe. So the only way to truly connect with another person, and that's the underlying assumption in the philosophy, is that our lives are incomplete without connection. The only way to truly connect with somebody is to pause on judgment and ask them, why do you feel that way? How come you say that? And if I were to represent it mathematically, it's basically an infinite number of senses multiplied by an infinite number of emotions for each person. A mathematician would say you can't do that because infinity is boundless. It's not an integer, which I agree with. Our senses and our emotions are boundless. Now, when I think about ubiquitous relativity, I think about it as a double-paned window. The first layer of glass is each of our physiological way that we sense the world. We all sense the world totally differently. Each piece of glass is a different width. Some are coarse, some are smooth, are all different. And then the second pane of glass are our emotions. That when we sense something, triggers that emotion. So when light comes into a double pane window, it contorts the same way when we sense the world physically, comes into us, our emotions contort. Now, I'm going to say two numbers, and I want you to think about what comes into your head. 9/11. Two numbers. 9/11. Now, when I hear 9/11, I think, because I was in Tribeca on 9/11, I lived there, I worked there, I saw the first plane hit the tower, and the senses that I feel are the senses that I had that day. They're the sight of the panic in people's eyes, the hearing of the sirens for days after 9/11, the smell of kind of the burning trash from the building, the way my mouth felt when I was breathing in that air, the touch of the ash and stuff on the ground. And I just assume that 9/11, I mean, everybody's going to feel that way about 9/11. But like most things in life, I'm wrong. My wife and I went to this musical a couple of weeks ago, Come Far Away.
Come from away.
Come From Away. And I thought that, it was an incredible story. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it's basically about the planes that were diverted because 9/11 happened and US airspace was closed. It was the planes that had to land in this little town called Gander, Newfoundland, Canada. And it was a story about human kindness, a story about how this little town of 7,000 people took in about 7,000 people who were stranded, nowhere to go. Supposed to fly into the United States, couldn't go. And they fed these people, they housed these people, they clothed them. And it's a great story of love and joy. In fact, they had such great bonds over these 4 days that they had a 10-year reunion in 2011, where a lot of people that were there came up. In fact, two people who were stranded at Gander wound up getting married. So now imagine for a second, I'm in a diner, and this couple that got married in Gander and met a few days after 9/11 were sitting behind me. And imagine that they're talking to somebody and they say, I hear the husband say, the day after 9/11 and the 3 days behind that was the most joyous days of my life. They were awesome. I mean, really, I can't think of better days I had. Now imagine if I hear that. I don't see anything, I just hear that statement. My first reaction, my emotion is going to be, is this guy nuts? Like, is this guy some kind of is he crazy? Who on earth would possibly think that the 3 days after 9/11 were full of joy? And I'd probably turn around and look at this guy like I was ready to pounce. But imagine if I paused on that judgment for a second. Imagine if I actually said, you know what? I'm going to ask him why. I turned around and I said, why would you think that the days after 9/11 were full of joy? And imagine if he told me and explained the story. Is it rational? Yeah. Would it make sense to me? Yeah. So here's an example of what ubiquitous relativity is all about. I hear something and judge it by the laws of my universe, what I sense, what I feel. When the reality is, here's another person with a perfectly good reason for why they feel what they feel. So maybe I can form a connection with this person instead of just judging them and dismissing them as a result of one sentence I hear in a diner that I don't know anything about. And this stuff goes on all day long. Judgments, 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 what we hear, what we smell, what we see. And as I began to write this book, my life began to change. I worked on Wall Street for 22 years. And I was pretty good, I thought, at compartmentalizing my life. There was Ian Weiner in the office, there was Ian Weiner out of the office. Ian Weiner in the office, kind of a jerk. But I had to be, I was managing, all these stock traders all over the country, and, managing people who are only motivated by money. Well, you gotta be tough on them, you gotta show them that fear is the only way you can truly motivate these people. In fact, I half-heartedly in jest said to them, don't have pictures of your family up on the desk. It's going to make it that much harder for me if I have to let you go. And that's what I became known as. No emotion. We'll fire people if it's the right thing for the profitability of the firm. Didn't matter. Now, when I left the office, there was Ian Weiner out of work. Wonderful husband, very agreeable, great sense of humor, would be there for anyone who needed me. And I thought I had it nailed. I thought I had that duality perfect, that compartmentalization that I've sought, which is like, you know what, if I don't take the office home with me, then I'm going to be a great husband. And there was a straight line between the two. Straight line. But then as I started to write Ubiquitous Relativity, that line began to blur. In all my life, throughout every day of those 22 years, I don't think there was a day that went by that I didn't say, you know what? If I make enough money, this job is a means to an end. All I've got to do is make enough money, and then I'll go do the things I want. If I can just make enough money. And the things I want, of course, were, I'll go to an island and be by myself and write my book. Or I'll go to Montana and live on 100 acres and, with dogs running around and write and just kind of walk off into the sunset. But it was always, I need to get my bank account to a certain level. And then I can go do the things I want to do. Now, of course, that bank account level kept going up, but that was my mentality. Every day, it was just a means. Yeah, it's tough, you hate it, but tell yourself that sob story that you're a hero, like, if I don't do it, who's gonna? I've got to support the family, I've got to do this. Yeah, it sucks, but that's what I've got to do. But then I kept writing about this philosophy, and I kept writing and writing and writing. And with each chapter, something weird started to happen. That who I was in the office and out of the office, that line started to really blur. And eventually it was like, oh, this is weird. It's hard. It's getting harder to fire people. It's getting harder to be a jerk and yell at people all day long. And slowly, when I was out of the office and writing, I began to have this gratitude for just being able to write. I started to look at my days kind of like, I'm not writing to do something 15 years from now. Like, I'm just writing. And my life suddenly became kind of an end in and of itself. Like, the gratitude I had for writing was just the enjoyment of feeling like I'm putting something down that I feel is important to me. It might be important to somebody else. And what I realized was, as I got to the end of the book, that whole line disappeared. And this was at the end of 2017. So now things were really taking a toll on me because I couldn't separate the two. And we were going through downsizing after downsizing. I didn't want to do it anymore. And so I came home one day, and my wife sat me down and she said, you don't have to do this. She was, we'll be okay. We won't have as much money, and we won't have as much stuff, but we'll be okay. I thought about it, and I was like, oh, geez. But she was right. And so we sat there and we circled a day in the calendar. And we said, May 15th, 2018, come hell or high water, we are out. I am leaving this business. And my wife, who was in film, said, you know what, I'll walk away for a bit. And why don't we go be global citizens and volunteer for a while around the world? And so for the next 6 months, until May 2018, life became actually pretty easy. I stopped firing people. I wouldn't do it anymore. I started asking people what they thought about things. I started saying, what do you think we should do? I realized that people could actually be motivated not just by fear, but they could actually be motivated by other stuff as well, like positive reinforcement. And so May 15th came. I got in the office nice and early. I sent out an email to my clients, to my coworkers, and to everybody in the media that I used to talk to in finance. And I told them that, okay, I've written this book, Ubiquitous Relativity, and it's all about kind of pausing on judgment and getting out of your comfort zone to expand your own universe and connect with other people. And I've talked about it, and now it's time to walk the walk. And that was it. And then, like I said, my wife said, well, you know, why don't we go volunteer around the world? Let's go be global citizens. And you can test out this philosophy of yours and go see if it's really important to connect with other people, to learn about new universes. And so we did that. A biography of your life. Would anyone want to read it? Would anyone want to read your biography? And I actually used that to eulogize my grandmother 10 years ago, where I thought she had a life that was successful because people would want to read her biography. And we all know who those people are, right? They're right at the front of the bookstore. They're right at the front of Barnes & Noble, and with a big picture on the front. Because you don't even have to ask who they are, you just look at the picture. And it says New York Times bestseller, and it's got great quotations on it from other successful people saying, you've got to read this book. So it's like a big circle of success. And that's how I viewed it. These were leaders, military commanders, or CEOs of companies, or Nobel Prize winners, presidents, athletic coaches, people who led people who left their mark. And that's what I thought. And by default, everyone else, nice people, but really didn't make a difference while they were here. Didn't really impact things. And that's the view that I held for many, many years. And then we went and volunteered. We volunteered in Bali doing sea turtle conservation. We went up to Sumatra and did island conservation. We taught refugee children in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We taught them English. And then we worked on an elephant sanctuary in Thailand. We were on this elephant sanctuary. And one of our duties, no pun intended, was to literally clean up the elephant crap every single morning. And so we did this. And one day my wife says to me, we're with another volunteer and about 4 local Thai employees at the sanctuary. And she says to me, as I'm bending down to clean this up, she goes, I'm going to take a picture of you. I'm going to send it back to everybody home. They're going to be like, what the hell are you doing? Now, there was a local Thai employee with us who spoke pretty good English, but didn't quite catch the nuance of the joke. And so he looks at us with a straight face and says, you are here to care for the elephant. And it kind of hit me. We're here to care for the elephant, but we're only going to be here for a few days and we'll be on to the next stop. But for him, that was his purpose. And he didn't think it was any more or less important than something else. So why take a picture of it? Why is that funny? Because, hey, that's as important as anything. And I thought about it, and I said, who am I to decide what success is, what it means to live a purposeful life? Who am I to make that decision? And so then I realized, I don't know what the hell success means. I don't know what it means to live a purposeful life. All I know is that I don't know. Is Steve Jobs any more purposeful than the elderly woman cleaning her steps in Bali? I don't know anymore. I used to think that was an easy question. I really don't know anymore because I can't make that judgment. And so that changed my definition of success for my book. Whenever anybody asks me do you hope your book is a success? I always think right out of the gates, well, how are the book sales? And what kind of revenue did I generate? And did all my friends who said they were going to buy it, did they buy the book? What did anybody of the critics say? How many stars on Amazon? And that's my initial reaction, and that's sort of the way I viewed things. That's why an astronaut was important, because their name was on the side of a high school and because they were more important than other people. They left a legacy. And why is Ernest Hemingway, my favorite author, why is he more important or more purposeful or more successful than some author in the back of the stacks who may sell one copy? I used to think it was easy. Well, he's famous and all the kids read his books in school and he led this crazy life and left a legacy. But I don't know anymore. Why is that more successful than the person who sells one book? Other than how I view success in my universe. And how I view success in my universe is not success in the universe. And that's the big premise of ubiquitous relativity. I just don't know. Why should I make that judgment? And so when I think of success, I get to be here. I get to talk about this with other people. I get to connect with people. Sure, I'd like the book to sell because I want to get the message. I want to carry this message as well as I can. But, it's hard for me to say that this is success and that's not success. Where is that line drawn? Who gets to make that decision? So I've really tried to catch myself and not get caught up in that, especially as we get closer to publishing date. I don't want to get caught up in, here's the line where if it sells this much, it's a success. If not, it's not a success, and tough luck. And so what does this mean for marketing of the book? Right? This is the big question. In today's world, marketing the book for me has really become marketing me as well. I'm in an interesting spot. Just May of last year, I was a Wall Street guy. Anybody who knew me only knew me pretty much as a guy on CNBC or a guy who yelled and screamed on the trading floor. But now, in June 4th of this year, I'm going to publish a book about philosophy. Now, anybody who knows I'm writing a book just assumes it's, got to be one of those Wall Street books. Guy whose career takes off like a rocket ship and then crashes and burns because of drugs and alcohol and everything else, and then finds their way back from the ashes with a lot of funny anecdotes in between. But it's not. It's a book about philosophy. It's a book about connecting with other people. So how do I get people from a point of seeing me this way to when the book actually gets published, they're not surprised. And they say, yeah, you know what? That makes sense. He's been talking about this for a while now. And so for me, every single piece of content that I put out, everything, my LinkedIn posts, my tweets, my Facebook posts, my Instagram photos, all of it, my blog, all have that common thread running through it. That's my personal brand now. And so there isn't a single post that I put out where you can't see ubiquitous relativity flowing through it. You can't see pausing on judgment flowing through it. And that's how I plan on getting people from here to there. Now, I'm on all the social media, and believe me, it was not easy. It's still not easy. But I send out an email to a distribution list once a month with something about what's either when we were traveling, what we were doing, or something related to ubiquitous relativity. I blog once a week, similar type stuff, thought pieces, kind of running down scenarios for people, walking them through kind of like how to pause on judgment. You know, I did one the other day where, you know, I said, imagine for a second you're driving behind a car on a one-way street and the driver's going incredibly slow, 20 miles below the speed limit. And you're in a rush because you got to make it to a movie. And the car in front of you has a bumper sticker on the back that says either Trump or Bernie Sanders. One of the two. Imagine either one. When the lanes open up and you can drive by this person, are you more or less likely to either honk the horn, speed by them, give them what I call the New Jersey stare, because that's where I'm from? Are you more or less likely based on that bumper sticker? I know for me, there are strong reactions I see when I see a Trump bumper sticker. And so my initial reaction is, well, I'm going to land the horn on this guy. Who is this person? Yeah, just wait till I get by them. But then I ask a simple question. What if it's not his car? And so stuff like this happens all day long. And so I try to create and think about situations where this philosophy can at least come into play and maybe help somebody, as it has for me, pause on judgment 1 split second a day. That's my goal. One judgment, just pause it. And when it comes to marketing the book, and it comes to how you want to present the book to the public, this is the way I look at it. It's like Hamlet, right? To thine own self be true. Everybody's got different ways of marketing their book and holding themselves out there to the public. And people will do all kinds of stuff. And that's their right to do however they want to do it. But I think for me, the only way that I can really truly be okay with it is to actually look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day. I mean, with all the posts that I put out, all the LinkedIn and all the Facebook and clever Twitter stuff, right? Because Twitter's a combat zone. And, you know, with all of that, my biggest success are calling people on the phone. I spend more of my time calling individual friends on the phone and meeting them for coffee to talk about the philosophy, but to hear what they're doing, to connect with them as human beings. And the reason I do that is because if we're really looking for book sales, I believe it's a hell of a lot more likely somebody's going to buy my book if I have a connection with them, a real connection. Not that they, click like on something. I mean, I've heard people say, social media coaches, right? Say, well, if you don't have 10,000 followers on Instagram, you're not relevant. You're not an influencer, I think is the parlance these days. I don't even know what the hell that means. I'm not an influencer. I'm not relevant because I only have 9,900 followers. So instead, I'd rather meet somebody and tell them what's going on in my life, find out what's going on in their life, connect with them. And that person's more likely to buy my book and potentially, if they like it, recommend it to others than the 10,000 people who say like on a picture of my dog. Now, he's a good-looking Labrador, don't get me wrong. But still, that to me is not that important. And people will do all kinds of things, and that is their right. And that's the hard thing, is not to judge them. I know people who buy themselves onto the New York Times bestseller list. I could have done that, quite honestly. I could have ran out and bought 12,000 copies of my book first week, and then just redistributed, who knows where, maybe 11,000 would have wound up in a warehouse. But I'm a New York Times bestselling author. And this sounded great when I first heard it, like, whew, yeah, why not? What better way? But then it just didn't feel right. And my wife asked me a very simple question. Is this in line with your core values? Is this who you are? And no, it's not. So I didn't do it. And it's the same way with all the people who are coaches. You know, I sent out a blog about this. What happened to all the players in the world? Everybody's a coach now. Social media coaches. People who can clean up your closet and coach you on your time schedule. They coach you on branding. They coach you on everything. And everybody's got the answer. Everybody seems to have the answer. And who doesn't want the answer? I mean, it's a great thing to have, right? I like a quick fix as much as anybody. Oh, you tell me 6-minute abs? Let's do it. I just can sit on my couch. I don't have to do anything. You'll coach me into how to get in shape? Let's do it. You're going to show me how to trade stocks so I can make millions and retire early? Just follow your plan. You're the coach. Let's do it. But for me, I hold myself out in my book very clearly multiple times. I have no idea if this is going to work for you. It may not. It's helped me, and it's helped me only today. It may not even work for me tomorrow. But I will never, ever tell anybody I have the answer for them. And I will never, ever advertise myself or hold myself out as I have the answer. I'm the coach. Just follow these instructions, and you will never judge another person the rest of your life. You'll connect with every human being you meet. I know for a fact that that's not true. And if that means that I lose book sales because I'm not on LinkedIn or I'm not on Facebook saying, I've got the answer, just click on this, give me your email, and I will flood your inbox with all kinds of stuff till you buy my book, won't do it. And so if that's the case, what is the expectation for the book? I mean, for me, my hope is that there will be a pause on judgment for people every once in a while. And that maybe that pause on judgment will lead to conversation with other people. And maybe that conversation will lead to a connection. And that going around like that, maybe that connection leads to another pause on judgment. And that's all I'm hoping for. I don't know what's going to happen. I've stopped trying to think about, well, I expect that all this stuff is going to happen and I'll be in bright lights and it'll be perfect and I'll never have to do anything else but this book the rest of my life. No, I just want to have a conversation with people. I just want to be able to say, maybe somebody will take this and have a pause on judgment for a day, with like some of the stuff that I've discussed. And, when I write, there's a high level of vulnerability. When people talk about sort of their secrets, however that is in a book, what kind of book it is, we share usually something about ourselves that people don't know. I know there's a lot in my book that people don't know. People are going to be very surprised when they hear about my story and the things that have gone on in my life and the mistakes that I've made. And so there's a nakedness out there, a powerlessness. I'm powerless over who's going to like the book. I'm powerless over how many are going to sell. I'm powerless over, well, pretty much everything in life. But there'll be critics. There'll be people who say, why are you bothering with this? There'll be people who say, you know what, you should have stayed on Wall Street. This isn't that great. But it's like Teddy Roosevelt said. All these critics, all these naysayers, people telling you don't write your book or don't do this or stop wasting your time, they're all in the stands, watching. But you, me, all of us, we're in the game. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Was it a hard sell your book to the publisher?
It was a hard sell in the sense that people only know me in finance. And so I'm trying to cross over into sort of the general audience. I had my finger on the button for Kindle Direct, Create Space, or whatever it is these days, to press publish and just say I want it published. But then through some connections, this woman, Jackie Jordan, said, you know what, we'd like to publish the book. We believe in the concept, we believe in what you're talking about. And so I waited this was last summer, when I was ready to go. And I waited because I thought, you know what, let me give this a chance to maybe get a different kind of distribution, and let me get a chance to sort of communicate my message and try to get people to see me for who I am now and not who I was. So that was really the difference between doing it myself, which I was ready to do, and doing it sort of with a boutique, which is what's happening now.
You're a winner anyway. You have winner in your name. So.
I will go with that. Because, I'll tell you, growing up with Weiner and Wiener, and let me tell you something, going to West Point with that last name, that's not easy. Okay? Having that name at West Point, Weiner, that was a long freshman year for me. Yes.
What is the balance between the marketing services provided by your publisher versus what you're expected to do?
So the publisher, the whole thing that I'm betting on with them is the ability to get my message out through either public speaking or through general media. So I've been very close, and this is really nuts as a Wall Street guy, but I've been very close to going on a couple of Fox News shows and actually defending Bernie Sanders and some of the other kind of left-wing ideas. So for me, it's like, great, I've got the relationships with all the financial networks. Now I need the relationships with the general networks, the morning shows, because this philosophy, yeah, there's some elements of business, but this is all about connecting people to people. And so that's why I'm paying them. I'm paying them to say, look, get me out there to speak. I can take care of, but most of the day-to-day stuff, the social media, all of the blogs, all of the content is mine. They option out the content. You can have somebody else write your content for you. That's part of the deal, but I won't have anybody else touch the content. So it's really about like, how do I get this message out there? This is your thing, and you're going to be able to get the book actually published a little bit more professionally than just dropping it on Amazon, and you're going to get it out there with different distribution channels. So that's the only reason the only reasons that I'm with them, as opposed to just kind of doing it myself. I need help because this message is so important to me. I need help getting it out there, other areas that I just don't have the relationships.
What's the name of the boutique?
It's called TV Guestpert. So,
That's the publisher?
they're both the publisher and public relations. So they're publishing the book for me. They do it literally a handful of books a year, called 5 to 8, and then they help me get out there and talk about the book.
How did you manage your time and discipline yourself to write the book?
Well, I tried to take a little bit of time each day, but most of it was the weekends because I was working the job. But as it slipped in, I found myself going into my office during the workday and writing. But mostly it was just saying, okay, like I've got options with my time. There are many things I could do, but this to me is the most important thing right now because it's the thing I have the most passion for. So really it's like, if I have to get up an hour earlier or go to sleep an hour later to fit in that little bit of time, and even just writing stuff during the day, like examples of this ubiquitous relativity. Part of the book, there's 10 short vignettes about this philosophy in action and just seeing how our quick judgments. So for me, it was like, oh, look, I just judged this again, knowing nothing as usual. And so here's a misconnection potentially. So whatever the book is, whether it's fiction, whatever it is, I think there's moments during the day that we have an option to either tell ourselves to write this down or to just kind of hope we remember it. So that's what it really was for me.
Your spiel resonated with me. I'm a recovering financial advisor for 20 years. So I was working across the border. I was a cross-border financial advisor, but I was in Canada. And May 15th was your D-Day, right? May 15th was my D-Day too last year. And then I was on a plane to Greece, sitting on heading to the beach to write my novel. So I was trying to listen to your story.
There you go.
I did it for 20 years. Before that, I was teaching in a boarding school. But I had the same thing as you. I was just thinking, why am I here? What am I doing here? I loved the job a lot in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I just fell in love with writing. And once the markets closed every day at 1 o'clock, I'd start writing, close the door, I got on the computer and we write.
Yeah. No, it's funny, right? I mean, I hit that inflection point where whatever money I was making and was going to make, that cost of leaving was less than the opportunity cost of missing out on my life. And once I reached that inflection point, it was an easier decision to make. But yeah, I hear you. I mean, you get in that comfort zone.
About opportunity cost, and it's really interesting. Is it takes a while to recover. It's like it was like not a disease, but it takes a while. Like just the fact that we're talking about success, it does take a while to recover because our brains think so driven in one way. It's all results oriented. Every day your results are on the screen.
Yeah.
And to hear, so it's quite interesting for me. I'm thinking I'm really enjoying this. Although my book is not about inspection points or anything like, it's not about sex and money. So I didn't say I'm saying.
Oh, that's good too.
I was just going to ask if I check your broker check with it being interesting on a search for
On broker check?
Yeah.
Well, probably. Yeah. I mean, the more interesting stuff actually, fortunately, didn't make it into broker check. But yeah, I mean, life for me was very fast on Wall Street. I started in 1996, and a good friend of mine surprised me and showed up today, who I used to work with, and it was a crazy time on Wall Street. I saw booms and busts and all kinds of insanity.
I was a security litigator, so.
Well, that's good. My brother is too, and he reminds me all the time. So yes, if you did a broker check, you may find one or two things. What you will definitely find, and this is something that people will learn in the book that they didn't know about me, was that I had to sell my house short to get out of a situation. That shows up in broker check. So that's not my thing. But that's something people don't know. People just assume I was a big shot. I bought a $4 million starting home in New Canaan, Connecticut. I had it going on. Well, 6 years later, there I am, begging the banks to do this for me because I had no money. I was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So it's funny you say that because I didn't realize that was something I had to put, but then I saw that like, oh, hey, have you ever had a bank forgive your debt? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, better put that in there.
TV Gusford, what's your distribution channel for you?
Barnes and Noble, a lot of other smaller bookstores, airports. So that's sort of their kind of pitch. Yes, they'll have online, they'll be at Amazon and they'll do Barnes and Noble online, but their main focus is sort of the distribution to the hardcover stuff.
Have you thought of getting your books into schools?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. I'm new to this. I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. So I would love to get this in as many hands as possible. The hardest thing for me is, I just don't know. But yes, I would love. I think there's something here. Right? I believe so strongly in this that I think there's actually an opportunity for us, especially in this environment, where people just. I've never seen anything like it. Think about it. People unfriend each other. That's the expression. Just cross them off the list. Everybody here I know has been to Thanksgiving dinners with uncles, spouting out crazy crap when they're drunk. I was the guy, I was the same person, but you had to listen to him. You couldn't just unfriend him at dinner, right? So to me, that's what's changed, and that's where it's so important that if we can find a way to connect again, I think we can end this sort of perception that we're so polarized. We're not. We're humans, and I think there's an opportunity to make that a little bit better, even on the margin.
I'm curious, when you decided to become a global citizen, how did you select the different places you would go and the services you would provide? I'm especially curious about the elephant sanctuary. And
So-
how hard was that to switch? That's a big, gear shift.
Huge gear shift.
Yeah, how did you?
So my lovely wife, who's here, it was her idea. We had, I probably went a little bit kicking and screaming. But we had a nephew who lived in Bali. And so we hadn't seen him. I'd never met him. So we started there, and we went on the web and tried to find these volunteer organizations. The reality is a lot of them link up with local organizations, which is good. You work with the local people. But whatever's advertised on the website, if you get 60% of that, it's a home run. Sometimes you get nothing. And we showed up to a couple places and they're like, It's like you just gotta kind of figure it out. But there are organizations that basically say, look, I won't say it's a racket, but it's an industry where you pay to go volunteer. And you pay, and so one of the most wonderful things for us was, we were the oldest people, but we could have been everybody's parents. There's all these kids there on a gap year. And I'd never even heard of them, what a gap year is, but these kids were there, young adults, between high school and college, and I'd never seen such passion.
But there are a few organizations out there for people in their 50s.
Yeah.
And I'm going to one, it's called Bamboo. And it's basically, you sort of help out, but you also enjoy the environment. I'm going to Bali a week after, a month after this. But Bamboo's one, Encore is another one. There are a whole bunch of really amazing groups. And then you sort of have to tolerate the people around you, I think. Go around with a group of people. I'm not big on that sort of thing, because I like to work people myself. But this is, you have to get along, obviously. But a lot of these groups, and the groups targeted to people 18 and above, and then there's ones that are 50 and above, and they do sorts of things like that.
Yeah, and the most fascinating thing, and this is where the philosophy kind of came into place, I can only speak for myself, I've had these images of based on only the things that I know in my universe. For instance, Muslim countries. I had a vision oh my God, we were going up to northern Sumatra, right? That's very, very, 90% Muslim. I don't know how many times, maybe a handful of times I saw a burqa in my life. And here we are, and we're going up there, and I'm assuming this is going to be, oh my God, the call to prayer. I never heard that. I got this, I got that. I'm scared out of my mind. These people could not have been nicer. We saw nothing but nice things. And we went to a city called Medan in Sumatra. 2 million people live in this city. 2 million people live in Medan. We show up for a weekend, my wife and I. Must have been stopped on the street 15 times for photos. We didn't see another American for the whole weekend. 2 million people live here. My wife was being stopped. Kids were doing that thing, like we were famous. Kids were whispering as we walked by. And it was just such a wake up. Like, you just assume, like, well, where could you go in the world where people are Americans? It was an enormous city. And it was like the biggest novelty to see us, Americans. But people couldn't have been nicer. And it's part of the whole ubiquitous relativity where it was like, I went in with my human rights, like, why can't, they don't treat their women right, and they don't, it's not fair, and all this stuff, and the women have to cover up, but the men don't, and that's not right. And then I just thought about it, I said, how do you know the women don't like covering up? How do you know that for sure? Have you talked to all of them? Or are you just saying that these are the laws of my universe, and God damn it, you better do what I want you to do? And so the answer is, I don't know, but I learned so much about different cultures just in living with them, that you just gain a different perspective, and that's what it's all about. It's about how do I expand my universe so I can connect with more people.
Doesn't it seem like the most judgmental people are people that maybe haven't traveled much at all? I always think that's really interesting. So it's sort of totally dovetails that you made that leap.
Yeah.
I was wondering, as May 15th approached, was it trepidation involved, or were you just so excited for the date, or was it liberating, or was it like, uh-oh, what did I do? Or
It was so exciting on May 15th at about 3 in the morning when I went in, because I worked New York hours. And then on May 16th, I was like, oh my God. Nobody called anymore. Like, nobody cared. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, the money starts going out. Now there's no money coming in. And I was just like, But yeah, I mean, there was an ego. There was who I created, this person that suddenly was sort of has to find a new way of defining myself. So I was excited because I got to go out my way too. And for somebody who's 45 in Wall Street these days, you're kind of an endangered species. And so for me to be able to just kind of go in, walk out, I was happy to be able to do that. So it was nice, and it was time, and now I get to do. I tell people I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing now. Finally, it took a long time, but I really do feel like every day when I'm meeting people and spending time with them, the ability to connect with them, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And who knows where it'll go, but today it's great.
It sounds like you really got to know yourself.
I did, and still am, because you do get to know yourself when you go from sort of the guy that you got 100 people who work for you. They're all laughing at your jokes, whether you're funny or not, and the different news networks are calling because they want to know what you think is going on in the markets, to going to volunteer in Bali with some 18-year-olds, and they're smoking in an area that says, you're not supposed to be smoking here. And my wife and I tell them, it says no smoking, and they basically say, F you. And we say, but in California, whatever, they go, well, you're not in America anymore. And they were from Germany or wherever they were from, and we kind of looked at each other and we're like, no, they're right. We're not in America anymore. And so, you kind of, it's that humility that you get, in life that really hit hard when we were doing different things, because nobody gave a crap, who I thought I was before we got there. They were just like, clean up the elephant crap.
Care for the elephant.
Yes.
That's right.
Have there been people from your Wall Street life who have reached out to you
Yes.
afterwards and said, how can I do what you did?
Well, I'll tell you, this is the most common thing I've heard from people, and quite a few, is that I'm living through you. That is my dream to go do what you're doing, but I'm stuck. I'm stuck. And I get it. Some people may be stuck. I don't, it's just, my wife and I agreed that we never want to ever have to describe our life as being stuck. But I think there's a lot of people who want to do it, but there's a ton of fear because, you're taking a huge leap of faith. You're in this comfort zone that you know so well. But to go do something else, it's terrifying. And look, I understand we don't have kids. That probably makes it a lot easier. But we bumped into a lot of families who were with their kids saying, you know what? We're going to show our kids the world for a year and then they can go back to school. But yeah, it's most people are very supportive and just tell me how much they'd like to do it and are motivated to kind of try to do some of this volunteering where, it's like a vacation with the family, but they do work.
And Ian, so my family's had experience, you don't have to necessarily, so I'm the one with 5 children. So in a reasonable world, I can't just go take care of 5 children. But we've found a way through Global Volunteers, it's another organization based in this country, where you can go and you can volunteer in countries, right? We've gone to 7 countries, volunteered on for anywhere from 3 weeks with the kids. And it does give your children and yourself the perspective of seeing it differently. To Ian's point of slow down, don't judge. Who are you you have this view or this opinion on something. How can you really judge unless you've been there? And if you read it in a book or you've read a blog, but there's nothing like experiencing it. And we felt that powerful for our kids to be able to go and then bring that back to school here. It's been powerful. So Global Volunteers, highly recommend it. You do pay to go, but you're just paying for where they set you up. They have people, their locals working for you, and you could have various jobs. Kids have worked in orphanages and hospitals in Romania and into Ecuador and Cook Islands and Poland, Costa Rica, various places.
Yeah, it was the same for us. So you get 3 meals a day, you get housing, you get some training, and they teach you how to deal with elephants or the orangutans or how to deal with conservation. And we went that route because we weren't sure about another route to take, and we thought, well, we'll try this and then see if this fits for us and is in alignment with our core values. And then along the way, we shifted gears a few times and did a few other things to keep trying new stuff in places where we didn't have to pay, but then you also have to pay for your lodging. And there's those, just finding what works for you. And it's definitely a business. It's mostly charitable but there are some places that do it for profit. But like you said, that's a great organization. IDHQ, we went through a lot, was great. But they connect you with places on the ground locally, which is what we were most interested in. I didn't want the money that we were spending to volunteer in Sumatra to go for anything other than local Sumatran organizations and for the people there. I didn't want it to be run by a bunch of white people from San Francisco who were profiting off of the elephants or the orangutans or the island conservation. So that was something that we decided on prior to leaving, like what are we willing to do, what are we not willing to do, what's our ethos and why. And we had to go through our own ubiquitous relativity, like my upbringing and what I felt passionate about his, where we were locking horns and then make decisions that way. So we bring it, like we literally, whenever we get an argument about it, be like, well, this is ubiquitous relativity. You're viewing it differently. I'm getting triggered. This is what I want to do. So it was great. It was perfect.
There's another marketing handle for your book. You can become a marriage counselor.
Yes.
Stranger things have happened.
Is this journey as an author that you've taken at the beginning or at its end?
That's a good question. I don't know. I hope it's the beginning. I really enjoy this. It makes me happy. So I think it's the beginning, and I keep writing, and I know there's a second book with every experience that this philosophy has shown me throughout my life that I think are valuable to me. And so, yeah, I think it's the beginning. I certainly don't see myself going back to Wall Street. So, well, thank you so much for coming, and I really appreciate it.